But mankind won't be destroyed. The fact that you and I are working here today is evidence of
Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, Jeremy. I beat you to it.
You did. I was like, oh, God, what am I doing? So slow.
I've got a super fast computer.
Wow. There we go. So welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London market, technology, change, innovation, and everything in between. This is our final week before Easter, so it is our end-of-term report, scorecard report. We're going to take a look at the news, and then we're going to review what's happened over the last 2 or 3 months, and then we are going to give our predictions about the future. So stand by your boats. But here we are. Right, let's get into the news. So I'm going to start, Ben. There's tons of news this week, absolutely loads of it. This is the first mad news. Non-fungible tokens become the latest tech speculation bubble. Madness. I can't quite get my head around exactly what they are, but they're kind of an extension of blockchain where you can register digital assets and they're being sold for vast sums of money. The one here, the first tweet from Twitter boss Jack Dorsey at an auction fetched $2.5 million. Wow, that's a lot of real money.
Yeah, it sounds totally insane when you first listen to it, but I suppose, like all art, if you can actually, keep the original, and that has provenance, as they say, then it has a value to it. So it's probably nothing really that new. It's just that the blockchain approach allows you to make sure that provenance is retained, and therefore the value. But there are obviously rather odd things, aren't they, that you would say, well, why would that be worth anything? But then I was thinking, there are Hockney, for example, David Hockney, the artist, does a lot of iPad drawings, and I could imagine that those sort of things, the originals of those, would be worth some money. So it doesn't matter in the end where the value is. I think it's an interesting development though, and it's a bit speculative at the moment.
Yeah, and I was interested by it because it was a few years ago they had a similar thing around using blockchain to track diamonds, because there's a unique cut to every diamond or whatever. So it does have implications. So yeah, you're right. First editions or whatever you want to call them, making sure that they are real and you've got them. I just the value is actually the value.
Well, I think all things will go up and down in value.
Yeah.
My sister is a kind of leading print seller of art prints, and that printing thing was something that was developed late last century, where you did limited edition prints and so on, and it took quite a long time for people to get their heads around prints versus original paintings, as it were, original artwork. But now that's very common and it's normal. And in some ways, it may be 2.5 million for something against 35 or 100 million for an original Van Gogh or more is a way of people getting into owning things. But I wouldn't really give a toss about the original tweet, quite frankly.
No, me neither. However, there is other news, and I've actually got, just bear with me, Ben, I managed to get this sound effect for this next piece of news. So here we go. Yeah, there we are. There's only one big news story. So yeah, you don't want to be driving that ship and that happen. It's the main thing. This is actually really big news, despite the madness of it blocking the Suez Canal, not just for insurance, but generally for a number of reasons. Obviously, it's blocking trade, but it's also just fascinating how the hell they're going to get it out of the sandbank that it's caught in. Because it's massive. Have you seen? I have no idea if this slide is right, but if it is as big as the Empire State Building, it just gives you some kind of scale. And in fact, it doesn't really matter. It's still a good slide. But this gives it a little bit of perspective. The Tonka Troy trying to dig it out.
I love this bit of it. This bit is that they said underneath this that they're dredging it out, but look at that is going to take about another 1,000 years to get that dug out, isn't it, with that tiny little digger?
I don't know how far that goes down, but I assume it goes a long way.
I think the poor old insurers will be looking at their claims going up day by day on this, and then looking at that photo saying, get on with it.
Yeah.
Get the big digger out.
You got a bigger one, gonna need a bigger digger.
That is not big enough.
Yeah. So yeah, that is big news this week. Also, I saw this insurance industry expect a slow but sustained change. I'm going to come back to this when we kind of do our school report. But the thing that's starting to aggravate me more than anything is this word insurtech. It's just so vacuous and doesn't mean anything, and it means different things to different people. So can we stop using it? I'm stopping using it. I stopped using it ages ago. But can we just say whatever it is? If it's a technology startup, it's a technology startup. If it's a new insurance company, it's a new insurance company. It's not an insurtech. So that is my gripe this week about.
Yeah, and Phil's saying, agree how to spell it. I agree with you, Phil. It's a tricky one, isn't it? And should there be a capital T and not? And I think it's. I agree with you. I don't think you're being controversial, Jeremy. I think it's had its day. FinTech as well. There was an article in the Times this week. There was quite a backlash against Rishi Sunak investing in FinTech when there's other businesses that could be focused on as well. And I don't disagree with any of that. I think it becomes a buzzword though that's used primarily for raising funds, for raising capital. But we'll talk a lot today, I think, about language and how when things are evolving fast, language has to catch up or keep up with it. And I think sometimes it doesn't. And you find that general term is just a broad brush thing that, to be fair to Oxbow, they do a lot of good work, but to keep on going, here's the latest InsurTech survey. It's too generic now, too generic.
So this next piece of news, we both spotted it for different reasons. So I'll let you lead on this one, Ben.
Sure. Yeah, this is a big story still. The Greensill collapse. Obviously, it's pulling in politicians like David Cameron and others who've been involved. But the insurance angle on it, I think, is really interesting. Is that, often we think of insurance as a somewhat staid, boring, as they describe it in the FT here, sober, sleepy side of finance. But this is a real big insurance story, because actually the whole edifice here of which was, it turns out, probably a bit of a house of cards, was fundamentally supported by underwriting policies which guaranteed the risks, or guaranteed if there were payments that didn't happen. And it looks as if certainly one of the underwriters at Tokio Marine, and who's since been fired, massively overstretched the risks that he was covering or supposed to be covering, which you thought wouldn't happen as much nowadays, but it still can happen, to some phenomenal number. I think I was just going to quickly check. I think it was something like, if I quickly gathered the article,
in the billions. It was a lot.
So it said that the underwriter in charge of the account had been dismissed as he had found to be insuring amounts to Greensill in excess of his delegated authority, with the total exceeding $7.7 billion. That's one hell of an underwriting delegated authority, isn't it? And they pulled, obviously, that once that they discovered this, they pulled that money. It's somewhat similar in some ways to the old AIG, which thing that collapsed AIG. So they pulled that. Obviously, they fired the underwriter and pulled the policies, which basically toppled, or as they say here, just completely pulled down this large financial entity. And the rest now will be about the fallout from that. So there are some questions. I think Tokio Marine have rather largely argued that they are now covered by reinsurance on this, but there are still questions about the ultimate impact of this, because it's a large amount of capital here.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So I saw this as well. I saw it through a different lens, where one of the reasons for this organization was supposedly amazing technology in the background that was able to predict future sales and cash flows and operations within the companies they were lending to, and so lend them at a lower rate. Anyway, since the collapse, they've interviewed the staff, and they said, well, actually, most of it was done on Excel spreadsheets.
It's always, but all of these frauds are the same. They're never the complex things that you imagine. They're always this, and they're always the same thing. One person takes money off another, they hold it up, they take the margin, and they pass it on to someone else, and then they pass it on to more and more people. It's like securitized risk. It was exactly the same thing that went on. It was the pass the parcel fraud, not fraud, the pass the parcel mechanism of making money, and in the end, someone loses, right? And governments, regulators never seem to get onto it. And of course, they're done on spreadsheets, and of course, they're done at the back of the envelope, because they're a little bit dodgy in the end. And you still have, I've still come back, the underwriter could write 7.8 billion and it wasn't noticed. That's a question you've got to ask, is where are the financial controls to cover that,
Well, maybe the new CEO will put some in place. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right. Let's move things on. So we're going to do a bit of a review, a bit of end of term, as I said, look back on the last 3 or 4 months and some key points. I want to start with what we covered last week, Ben, which was the leading underwriters report, which I believe is going to be launched next week. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe that too. It's going out in the insurer. So I hold my breath as I say it, because you're never quite certain that it's going to go out, because other things could knock it off the front page. But it should be out every day next week. So Monday to Thursday. I think that the last day of the Underwriter Fest, as I'm calling it, is Thursday, where there will be a women's, that'll be the women's ranking, and I think they're doing something around ESG at the same time. So it should be good, and then we'll be running various sort of media off the back of that. Some of our clients will be doing things as well, and we, after our little holiday next week, will do a special on it the week after. So
Yes.
should be good. Should be good.
I'm looking forward to that. So that's the first thing. So second thing is, well, big topic over the last few months, really, people, culture, and change. I'm going to add into the mix for that. Obviously, we've talked quite a bit about the Lloyd's culture report, review, whatever you want to call it, and some discrepancies that we feel are in there, and perhaps a kind of in terms of the communication, I think there was probably a positive spin on something that may not be true without seeing the full facts and figures behind the report. So that was the first thing. And then I think the second thing around this is, as people and organizations start to think about what their business and operating models are going to look like in the London market, and the roadmap to getting back to normal becomes clearer, it's going to be really interesting to see whether we use this period, not we, but organizations use this period of time, and Lloyd's I include in this, to really have a conversation about what London and the insurance sector will look like. Because I don't think it can go back. The people I've spoken to are definitely forward-thinking organizations, are seeing this as an opportunity to rethink and reevaluate their operations. So
yeah. I mean, it is a complicated situation, and I can tell you from looking at all of the surveys and the research that we're doing, and the implications, that I think it's extremely complicated in all sorts of different ways. I think if you just take one of these, is how do you get people back to the office, and how do you work on kind of bringing in different cohorts on different days, all the travel issues, all the logistical issues, all of the different ways, those will need different ways of working. Layer that on then with actually the fact that there's some businesses have moved to new agile type working environments anyway. That was pre-COVID. So Beasley, Hiscox's, I've seen Aegis is going into 33 Bishopsgate. So there's organisations with changed working practices. I think that the way that meetings, for example, will be organised, you'll have hybrid meetings with online and not online. What do you do about travel? So these are all just fun, practical things that we never had to really think about before, because we all worked in a certain way. So those will all just be the starting points. Plus, then you've got just change in terms of technology that we'll talk about in a second. I think a ratchet up in the competition as well now. I think the Hartford offer that was made by Chubb last week will just be the start of more consolidation. Obviously, they've rejected it, but that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. The battle will be for capital and scale at one end of the equation, and the other will be about specialization and value add and so on. So you have got a changed world, and only not because it was the pandemic brought in anything new. I just think it accelerated everything so rapidly. And now we've been sitting at home with one way of working, but now we're going to have multivariate ways of working and operating, and multivariate choices and decisions that need to be made. And I suspect that most of these businesses will not have been able, well, I know they won't have really been able to get together and sit around the table and say, what are these decisions and what are the implications and what does it look like? So it's very, very complicated, I think, and it'll be messy.
Yeah. And I think it's going to need, I think the organizations that will succeed are those that have good leaders, good leadership structures, and they can make decisions, quickly, and then bring the organization along with it. Because what I think needs to happen is that those business leaders need to look at their organization and go, right, what's important, where we all have to get together and do whatever we do to make this organization great. What are the key things? And you've listed a load of them there, Ben, about, moving people together. What about meetings? Actually, what is it fundamentally that we do? And then work back from there and go, okay, these are the key things that we need to do as groups. These are the things that are just transactional. You can do at home. These are, whatever it is. And then all the other conversations will happen. So for me, I think there's a big piece here about leaders and leadership and leadership organizations, I want to say, that have that cascaded, I don't really know that leaders throughout the organization is what I'm trying to say, that are able
that everybody. Yes, and I think that's the good culture where everybody takes responsibility and everyone has a responsibility to lead. I don't think that would be true of a lot of organizations, or that we work with, or not enough. And I think the other thing is the culture piece, which is that if you have all of these changes, the instinct of many of the institutions will be to apply rules and regulations, because that's how they work in the bureaucratic sense and how they need to work for many parts of the organization. But if you're really asking people to change, and you then start to trample on those cultural ways of working, I think you'll start to find there will be issues and problems and challenges as you go forward, which is why I say I think it will be quite messy, and I think it will take. I think you're absolutely right. It will take really good leadership at all levels to say, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it, and not kind of go back and forth over things. I think you have to be quite decisive now. So you need to have people who can look ahead as well and manage uncertainty. People will feel uncertain. People will feel unsettled, I think, for quite some time.
Definitely. So that's our first bit. So the next section, technology. So I have some conversations, and this plays. Well, there's all sorts of things we've been talking about here, but PPL and white space is kind of where we're going to center our conversation, I think, for this section. And the problem that I've got with PPL and the platform placing is the word platform, because for me, platform means something different than what I understand PPL to do. So technology platform is an environment for building and running application systems and processes. And it enables you to bring things together. So you think about Microsoft 365. Within that, you've got email, you've got your calendar, and then you've got hundreds and hundreds of other applications. And depending on your business and what you do, you may use them or you don't use them. And like, if you're like us, you don't use many of them, 5% of them. But that is a technology platform that allows you to then expand, and then you decide whether that's an open architecture and you just let people build onto it, or whatever it is. And it seems to me that PPL is just an enhanced communication method and repository for data and documents, which I think has been very useful. But I think the problem I've got is the terminology that we were talking about with InsurTech. What is this thing? I as well, haven't you, with the survey?
Yeah, well, we've started doing some research in this area, and I don't want to give too much away because it's early days. We're looking at what's coming back early on, but I think quite a few people are saying we describe something as a trading platform just for research purposes, not only Whitespace and PPL but other trading platforms. But people say, well, that's not a trading platform, it's a storage system. It stores PDFs and it does some email. That's it. So actually, one of the things that I think you start to realize is the language, to your earlier point, does live within the tech space. It has been commandeered, I think, to some extent by those technologists in the marketplace. And what I believe is that the people in the market have to wrest it back and say, stop talking about jargon to do with systems and EBICs or PPL or acronyms or those terrible kind of wiring diagrams that always come out. Start talking about what these systems enable you to do, because I think someone on one of your events, maybe a webinar, said that leave the technology to us and you get on with growing your business. It might have been Bart from Dutch.
Could have been, yeah. Sounds like him.
Might have been Bart saying it, and I thought, what a great comment, because I think that's the problem. Is we feel we all have to talk about the technology and the platform and the wiring and the hardware and the software, whereas actually we don't have a clue. We don't really understand it. What we should be saying is, what do we want to do with it? What is it actually doing for us? And whoever provides these, because now we've got a more open, competitive market, whoever provides these services, this is what we want, right? I don't need to do it myself. I don't need to design it myself. I need it to do X, Y, and Z. And my contention is it's the communication bit that's missing. PPL to some extent is limited on that, and it's limited compared with, say, the banking or the other financial trading markets like Forex and things like that. And we are way, way behind of that. We're 15 years, 20 years perhaps behind in terms of what Bloomberg did with instant messages and trading online and things. Oh, I just lost my picture, so I'll redo that in a minute. I think that is the key, is that you've got to actually focus on taking that language into the human space.
They've heard you, Ben, and they've pulled your plug. That's direct into your system. Just make sure they didn't like what you were saying.
That's what happens. That's what happens. You see, it's when I had the jab. I think they might have. They might have put the micro technology in at that moment. I did have a slight suspicion. It felt a bit metallic.
Yeah. When you left, did you say, right, when you get home, just turn yourself off and on again, and you'll be all right?
I have to do that every evening anyway nowadays.
Good. Right, so that's our technology. I'm going to come back to technology when we do the predictions as well. We're on predictions. So I'm going to start my predictions around technology. So that as that report said, I think in the insider was that technology transformation was going to slow down essentially, and there will be a steady kind of progression. And I don't believe that. For the conversations that I have with CIOs and operations people, they say this as a massive opportunity to fundamentally revisit their operation and business models, look at the technologies, as you were just saying then, Ben, that are around that will enable that, and then put a plan together that will over the course of time help them to achieve that. Because I think it isn't one of the mistakes that was made pre-COVID was that kind of digitization or modernizing core systems was just a kind of tick box exercise, where it's patently obvious that it isn't, because technology is going to change. We have in the news, we almost always have a new bit of technology or a new application of older technologies to something, and that has implications for insurance. And maybe not today, but in 5 years and 10 years time, and you need to be in a position in order to take advantage of those opportunities. Otherwise, you're going in the spiral downwards rather than taking the opportunities and working up. So I don't believe that slowdown is going to happen. I think right now, as we've already talked about, people are talking about how we get people back to the office and how we will transition into a new way of working. But beyond that, strategically, I think that the pace of change will, if anything, I think it will pick up, because as they start to make those incremental changes, future changes will become easier, because they would have got rid of some of that legacy that's holding them back, and they'll be on more agile systems and operating models, and they'll be able to move forward faster. And those that can move in a fast and nimble and agile way, I think we'll win. They'll win some market share.
I think you're right. I can't disagree with that. I don't know why, really. I mean, looking at the Oxbow, why they would say that this would be slow and steady. I don't think it will be slow and steady either. I can't see that. I mean, if we're talking about insurance, let's say, and they were too. So I really don't. I don't, for lots of reasons. I think one is the whole digitalization of the world and the idea that you can actually develop new products and services because you're digital. In other words, you don't have to replicate an insurance product or service. You just do something within the insurance sphere that is digital and allows you to make some money off it, right? So that's going to be a big driver for people because it's a big space to get into, and there's lots of opportunities. So that's one area which I think will mean which all the technologists, in a sense, or people who understand that technology, that digital stuff, will get into. So entrepreneurial stuff will come in. I think the second reason is that money's coming in. So if you look at, Whitespace has been purchased in the last few weeks by Sequel, which is owned by Verisk. These are vast organizations with a lot of capital to spend, and they're spending it. So you get a meeting, I think, from, one end. I think the resistance will probably be mostly, particularly in London, will be in the middle, which is what do you do about the culture? And I think you have survey after survey at your conferences, and we've seen the same, which say culture will be the biggest barrier. So the question is, will that culture be a barrier? Well, I think it will. I think it will be to some extent, but I think quite a bit of it will have been removed because of the changes we've talked about earlier on, and because we're in a period where you necessitate change. And I talk about markets that are thinking or not thinking. I think pre-COVID, the market was thinking a bit, but it was pretty comfortable, pretty institutional, and felt that life would just go on quite, as lovely as it ever was. I think that everybody's been rocked by the pandemic. I think that now it's a thinking market. And I'll go back to the Hartford example. That is not the action of a business that is just grabbing at things. They thought about that. They thought, right, okay, what do we do? What do we have to do? Let's make this big move. Didn't pay off on this one, but it will pay off on the next one. So it's going to be about probably people being more audacious than they've ever been before. And that's great, really exciting, I think. And it's what we've all hoped for in insurance.
Yeah, definitely. Have you got any I forgot to put the slide up, Ben. We'll perhaps do that next week, where you predicted in 2016 some facts and figures for 2020, and they turned out to be quite accurate, surprisingly.
Yeah, I say so myself. So I would say that we'll come back to them next week, but or the week after next. But actually, I think most of the predictions around the technology space and the service space are coming to pass. So I think they're going faster. That's all I would say that from those original predictions. The other one I think I did predict was about the customer focus. I think that's really coming through very, very strongly, and the growing and the building of brands. So the development of brand in the insurance world, I think, will be is happening, and money's going into it, investments going into it, it's being taken seriously. So that's the kind of next big thing, and that was predicted. The one where I think there is I sort of predicted this as a non-movement, and I think it's gone backwards, is the collaboration between brokers and underwriters. And I think this has got to be the distribution chain, if you like, has got to be worked out going forward. I don't think that works particularly well. I think it's got, I think with the hardening market, we've seen in research that it causes issues and problems. That it's back to culture almost, which is, and it's also back to focus, is what value are we trying to deliver to the customer? And we've talked a lot about that. So particularly in London, I think that needs to be sorted out somewhat. I think it's a big issue. It'll start to become more emphasized, I think, as you get the Willis Towers Watson Aon merger. and I think there will be increasing pressure to sort out what this relationship really is, what this value add relationship is really between underwriting businesses, brokers, and then ultimately the customer in some shape or form. We've got to do a lot of working out of that.
Cool. So technology moving fast, focus on the customers, and I think I'm going to say that this time next year, the larger organizations will have put in place an operations and technology and business strategy that may or may not align with the future at Lloyd's, and probably won't, because I think they've got to make decisions. Coming back to leadership and making decisions, they've got to make decisions, and it's better to make a decision and perhaps tweak it later on than just hold fire and wait for the future at Lloyd's, whatever the next iteration is to come along. So I think that divergent that Lee Elliston warned about in October, December last year at the events, just saying that, he could see that happening. Companies having to set directions and strategies, the London market moving in a slightly different direction at a slower pace, and suddenly it starts off like that, and before you know it, they're so far apart. It's almost you can't reconcile it. So
well, I agree with you. I think you are going to have divergence, and that is about competition, and I think that's what has been inevitable, and we've managed, or Lloyd's and other organizations have managed to keep that together to some extent over time. But I think now it's going to be a bit more of every man, woman for themselves in the market and looking after their own things. Now, I don't mind that. I think there is a need for some management of some things, and we'll get perhaps people on to talk about that. Data and standards probably being one of them. Regulation is probably largely, we've certainly got enough of that. But I think it's then about, where does everybody's interest lie, and to what extent do you manage that competition going forward? Lloyd's has tried various encouraging things, I suppose, like Syndicate in a Box and a few other ideas. But they're not really scratching the surface. They're not really the real story. The real story is, what is the big digital play of the Chubbs and the AXA XLs and the huge global organizations? What are they going to do to create cost effectiveness and cost efficiency in their businesses while delivering the product? Where does the kind of portfolio specialization play in then behind all of that, and what's the value add of the market? So those things are positives to go for. There's huge opportunity, which is the good thing. We haven't got a market that doesn't lack opportunity, or lack, it has lots of opportunity, if I can get that phrase right. And I think that's the really good thing. We've got an image issue. I think that's the other thing right across the board. I think that means that one of my predictions will be about purpose. I think purpose will become very important. Jonathan Clark, who we haven't mentioned today, talked about it. Yeah. And I think others have really talked about how they're going back to that idea, the authenticity of their business and what they do. And that's what purpose is really about. And I think that will become more and more important. And I would say that I think all of the major businesses will really focus around that purpose. And it could be that is a way of creating that greater trust, I think, in the business and the connection ultimately with the customer.
Yeah. Very good. So we will make a note of our predictions, and then we will make them public, and then we can be humiliated this time next year when we've got everything wrong, because we'll all be living on Mars or something.
Or we could just bury them and not mention them again if they're wrong.
Oh yeah, that's the other one, isn't it, as well?
That's what most people do.
That is what most people do. Right. So let's wrap this up. Do anything this weekend, Ben?
Not really. I'll probably go on my bike, and I'm looking forward to it opening up a little bit next week. So we're going to be able to socialise, I think, aren't we, by the end of next week, or just after Easter?
I don't know about that, to be honest.
What? You don't know about socialising? You just don't want to do it. You've gone.
Anymore. And no, unless it's I'll have to carry a screen around so I can make it feel, and a microphone stand.
Let me just put you on Zoom before I talk to you.
Yeah. No, I'm not doing anything. I'll tell you. Well, I've got to pick my car up in a minute. So this is an annoying story that I managed to damage my own car with another car that I also own in my own drive. God. And then I only hit the bumper, but I broke off this little tiny piece. And apparently it's a fail. It's the thing that flies out of the bumper at the front and then squirts the headlamps and washes them. I don't know how that works. I didn't even know I had them. But anyway, it's an automatic MOT fail. £330 I'm about to spend. Oh, it makes
There we
sense.
are. Well, you've got to be more careful.
I
Just
know.
got to be more careful.
That's it.
Those things are like the light in the fridge, aren't they? You don't actually know whether they actually work because you can never run out and see whether there's a thing spraying your headlamp.
Yeah. I literally had no idea until it came back going, yeah, it doesn't work. I was like, what doesn't work? Hey ho. Good. Right, we'll have one more blast of the horn.
Yeah.
That's
Good
good.
luck with the ship. Good luck with the
luck
ship.
with
Get
the
the
ship.
big digger. Get the big digger out.
Yeah,
Don't
we won't
mess
see you
around.
next
Don't
week.
muck around.
Yeah, we won't see you next week, but we'll see you the week after. Thanks,
Have
everybody.
a great Easter, everybody. Bye.
Bye.